Hello again. Part of this video is sponsored by Supercell. We'll get into that later though. Today we're continuing the story of Large Bootyman. You'll remember we left him as he started his exodus from Muldraw onto the highway. To most of you it'll be pretty obvious where he's headed, but in case you can't guess, it's Louisville. You'll probably also know then that one does not simply drive into Louisville. First you have to get through a few checkpoints. So after squeezing the Pazuzu around the jammed up wrecks, Large has some work to do on foot, with his shotgun. But one checkpoint simply leads to another. At least for this one there was no need for the sledgehammer, as the locals were more than happy to bring the gates down for a chance to get at Large. Unlucky for them, Mr. Remington is eating well, swallowing box after box of shells on his crusade against the very concept of undeath. On to checkpoint the third then, which will be sledgehammered despite the protestations of yet more locals on the other side of the fence, and this is predictably followed by more of Mr. Remington's Dawn Chorus. So here we are, headed through the refugee area, past the hospital and over this highway junction. Eventually. Maneuvering the Pazuzu is tough with a trailer, you know. We're spoiled for choice when it comes to comfortable places to call home here, but Large seems inexorably drawn to the waterside, presumably because he knows that fish are by far the best source of food this far into the apocalypse. This one ought to do. All of these waterfront mansions have their own little docks, and most have decent walls up already too. But first, let's cull the locals so we can unload the Pazuzu in relative peace. Large is in a rush to set up the generator to charge his 1993 model smartphone and settle into his nightly Clash of Clans session. The servers for which are by some miracle still running this far after the collapse of civilization. You too can join Large in Clash of Clans. I'm sure you've heard of it by now, but in case you've been under a rock for the entire history of mobile gaming, you play as the chief of a village in a persistent online world that you're tasked with growing. You can do this using resources gained from either raiding other players' villages with hordes of troops or by producing them in your own village, allowing you to turn a village held together by spit, grit and sand into a veritable fortress. Perhaps you think you'll be able to take down Large's village and get at his shinies. It's not likely, but by all means download the game for free now using my link below and find out for yourself. Thanks to Supercell for supporting the channel. Now it's time for Large to get back to work. For some reason, before we arrived, it seems this place was occupied by a pair of prisoners and a cop. It's a bit weird, but whatever. It's time to carry out all of the bodies and start ripping out some of this vegetation. This is a very tedious task that'll end up being done in little bits every day rather than all at once, which I think will actually lend a nice sense of progression to the house too. Perhaps more important though is to get that generator running and stick anything perishable into the fridge. Then it would probably be wise to build a new door, since we're just wide open right now. I'm generally open to the idea of being neighbourly, but things have really gone downhill in Louisville lately. Anyway, that's a good start. But for now, it's, okay, no, I'm not going to do time for bed again.
Time for bed.
The next morning, after a breakfast of raw cabbage, Large is going to start poking around the neighbours' houses. There's not usually that much of interest in houses with this save's awful loot settings unless you're in a survivor house, but for some reason this place did have an AKM in the garage. There's not much ammo though, sadly. It would be quite good fun to use that. In our other neighbour's house I found a new baseball bat which I immediately hammered nails into, filling the painful spiked baseball bat shaped hole in Large's heart. Okay, to finish this day off, let's build some walls. This place has a nice fence, but it needs securing over on the banks down here and also a little bit more at the front, which eventually I'll turn into some kind of vehicle bay. Wall building and the associated lumberjacking is tiring work though, so now it's time to snaffle some more raw cabbages and slink away to sleep. In the morning, I took the time to clear this bedroom of greenery, symbolising the fact that Large's mind is slowly becoming re-civilised, or something like that, I don't know. And of course we'll need to start farming sooner rather than later, so let's prep a little area out back for that. I went pretty overboard on this in the last place, to be honest, so let's try to rein it in a little here. There's no need for 2 fridges full of stale cabbages. I need some garbage bags to make rain collectors for here anyway, so let's go and have a skulk around. I immediately ran into this barricaded house which was mercifully full of axes, but nothing else spectacular. Still though, axes are good. You get through so many of the things when you're building. And here's a rather grim scene. 2 unzombified bodies with a Taurus M9 pistol on the floor. Grim, like I said, but handy. I've wanted a nice 9mm option and this is it. There's at least 1 spare mag and hundreds of rounds back at the house. On the way home, this pretty large group tried to ambush Large. They obviously didn't get the memo that he'd found a new ban. After dispatching them and getting home, I realised that it's raining, which as you should know by now means it's time to throw some seeds in the ground. I planted cabbages and potatoes for now, since they seem like they'll be the best vegetarian options for gaining weight. Some zombies were obviously attracted to the sounds of planting because they showed up at the door like some far too old trick-or-treaters. Meanwhile, I was looking at the garage and visualising it as some kind of armoury, which is a job for later, but one that I'm eager to get into. The next morning, after eating another breakfast cabbage, which is just a regular cabbage by the way, it's time to catch some fish. We still can't even make a simple rod, so we're just going to have to stand on the dock and spear at the water all day like an absolute maniac. I noticed that I caught barely anything all day until the fish suddenly started forming an orderly queue to jump onto my spear in the afternoon. I'm not sure if that's a thing in Zomboid, but it bears further investigation. First though, let's eat a whole trout. The next morning, after a nice breakfast of fish and cabbage... Jeez, imagine what Large's guts smell like. Ugh. Anyway, after that, we spend some more time working on the wall out front before deciding to head out. But we're not looting this time. Large just has a burning need to play like John Wick for a while. So we have a spare compensator that can fit the Taurus and a spare 15-round mag. There is this 50-round 9mm drum mag, but sadly it's not compatible. Anyway, that's fine, we're taking a few hundred 9mm rounds and also keeping Mr. Remington with a few shells close at hand for Code Brown moments. I always just default to shotguns in Zomboid and have to make a conscious effort to make use of my other armaments, because by comparison they always feel a bit limp. But I've got to admit, this was good fun. The culling feels much more deliberate and intentional when it's done one zombie at a time. I've sort of vaguely stumbled north on my rampage to this distillery, so while here, let's check out the inside. It's getting dark and the place isn't exactly empty. It's pretty creepy in here. The only thing in any of these crates seems to be empty bottles, which makes sense, but I had hoped to find some of the leftover ingredients of the distilling process. Whatever those would be. Sugar? Yeast? Depends on what they were making, I guess, but in any case, no luck. It really is getting late now though, so it's time to call this John Wicking to a close and head home for a fish before bed, as is Large's routine at this point. First thing in the morning then is to make that rain collector for the farms, and then I realise that I live on the river and don't need it. Oh well, it looks the part if nothing else. You can place rain collectors above sinks and stuff like that to plumb them in, allowing you to draw from their storage indoors, but I've never really felt the need to go down that route personally. It seems a bit bougie, you know? Oh, you have running water in the apocalypse, ooh la la. Anyway, now it's time to fish more. I found this net trap too at some point, so we'll stick it in the water and try and remember to check it every now and then. I think that it exclusively catches small bait fish, which will be handy if we ever get some kind of actual fishing kit. After another whole day of fishing, I think that tomorrow we'll do something a bit different. Nah, just kidding, we're fishing all day again. But this time we're getting pissed for it to help. Can I say that on YouTube now? Who knows? I'm gonna leave it in anyway. Ugh. But this time we're getting pissed for it to help clear off that nasty depression moodlet that's been hanging over us for some time now. Alright, that's a decent stock of fish, it's time for bed. The next morning, it seems like the world has been blanketed with fog. I don't like going out much on foggy days in Zomboid since the zombie's vision is unaffected, meaning it's purely a debuff to you, so instead we'll be gathering a load of scrap clothing and starting work on the garage. Here in my garage, which will henceforth be called the workshop, for now I've just made a pair of tables and a crate. It's not exactly cutting edge, but it lets me engage in what Robaz refers to as scrimscrams, which is just a cute way of saying placing stuff in the space and making it feel cozy. Not that Remington shotguns and spiked baseball bats are enormously cozy in nature, but having things in their assigned place and on display, well, that's just cozy. But before we really get into stuff here, we're missing quite a few skill books and magazines. I want to start training tailoring for a start, but not without a book. Luckily then, there's a library not far off. The next morning, more like the middle of the night really, we're off down the road to take a look. A few locals needed dealing with on the way, but Large is a stealthy boy and makes it without much fuss. Once inside, we quickly find pretty much everything we'll need. Carpentry, fishing, tailoring, cooking, all the books, and some of the magazines too. I finally actually have access to trapping now. I even picked up first aid books. How you're ever expected to train that is beyond me. It's easier in multiplayer, I guess. I didn't quite finish looting the whole place, but it's close enough to just come back another time. To be honest, I just thought I had everything I needed. I forgot totally about the angler magazines that would let me make a fishing rod, but oh well. The spears do actually work just fine. An uneventful walk home and some light carpentry later, bookshelves. First on the list is to read whichever magazine lets us make traps, which is this one. So since I have worms... Ugh. Not like that, I mean I have the ones in the compost bin. They're a good bait for catching small birds in these stick traps. In Zomboid, in case you didn't know, for a trap to work you need to be at least 75 tiles away. These gardens are about 30 or 40 tiles wide and there's little slithers of land between each of them, so as long as I place my traps a couple of houses over they'll be fine. With them set and baited with my homegrown worms, it's sleepy time. Now, we might have a few days of just reading here, which isn't enormously interesting, but it is necessary. Before that though, let's go check on the traps. It looks like one caught a burb, another broke, a third lost its bait, and the last had no action. It was quite nice of the game to demonstrate all of the eventualities for us, but it's not so nice of the game to throw all these guys at us, but fair enough. I guess they're attracted to the little burbs thrashing around in the traps. Alright, let's get our haul home, grab a knife, butcher it, and then slam it in the oven. It looks like in Zomboid, little Robin is more filling than a whole trout. I'm not sure about that, but fine, I'll take it. And then back to reading. Like I said, we're going to be doing a lot of this. Right now we're on Farming 3, but we'll also be reading Carpentry 3, Metalworking and Electronics 1, Cooking something or other, you get the idea, books. A benefit of all this sitting around is that by being close to the fridge at all times, we'll get quite fat too. After another few days of reading, we're up to 65 kilograms, which is nice, but it's time to restock the fridge with a day of spearfishing and then follow that up with some looting, since it's just kind of been a boring few days. I've barely looted this area at all, so I don't need to go far to find an untouched house. As usual, there's nothing really interesting inside, but it's nice to get some ripped sheets from clothing that wasn't on a desiccated corpse for a change. There was also this full propane tank. Since we've got a barbecue on the back deck, if for some reason we didn't want to cook in the electric oven, we could use that. It's not likely to ever come up, but it's still a nice option to have. One final reading session later and we've got the first of our crops to seed stage. I did fertilise some of these cabbages when I arrived, so presumably this was one of them. It provided 11 cabbages and 33 seeds, which is pretty great, but now I've got to wait for the rest before replanting it to at least keep things kind of uniform. And we're up to 69 kilograms. Nice. All that fish is going straight to Large's thighs.
Yeah,
he's getting thick. Having gone from very underweight to just regular underweight. You love to see it. This is getting very boring though. We've got pretty much every skill at its highest XP multiplier and we're just waiting for crops to grow. Let's go steal some more gun stuff from the police stations here in Louisville. I marked Louisville's various police stations and gun stores on the map and set off to one that looked like it'd be pretty quiet. Don't ask how Large knows the location of every police station, he just does. Jeez, this storm is crazy. Adds a nice atmosphere to the mission though, doesn't it? Ah! Okay, so we hit a tree pretty hard there and took a deep wound to the neck. Damn near bled out, but stuck a bandage on it just in time. Let's just head home for now. I think we'd best wait out this storm and get healed up. Half a bottle of whiskey and some painkillers will let us at least get some sleep. I guess now is a good time to read that first aid book, actually. At least the cabbages have been enjoying the rain. This whole patch is ready for harvest now, so I'll get that done and then replant them, as well as some carrots and broccoli, because why not? I was bored and didn't have anything else to read, so I just mooched around the house and cleaned up all the remaining vegetation in the rooms I never go into. And after another night's sleep, I realised that I'd actually have to do more to this wound before it will actually heal. So while I don't have a suture needle, I do have a regular needle and some painkillers. Try not to think about this too much if you're squeamish, but we're sewing our own neck back together. That's pretty metal and surely yields massive amounts of first aid experience, right? Right? Oh, okay, it yields around 15 XP. Okay, how do you train this skill? What does it even do? Either way, with it done, it's time to just sleep it off. Oh, wow, we actually did just sleep it off. We'll still show us having the wound stitched for some time, but our health bar is back to full again. So I guess we're good to go for attempt 2. What about the Pazuzu though? I never actually checked how badly it got damaged. Well, it's definitely not going to be good for the resale value, but it'll get us where we need to be going. Large, being fairly well versed in this whole urban looting thing by now, heads a little way past the police station and makes a lot of noise with his gun, before looping back to the actual target and getting back to work. After a brief poke about, we locate the secured doors, bash them in with old sledgy, and get to rummaging. Oh boy, it's good this time. Ammo cans full of 5x45, lots of shiny guns and mods, but perhaps the shiniest of all, a pair of striker shotguns. The amount of ammo that spawns in these canisters is truly outrageous, but I'm not going to complain about it at this juncture. Instead, I'm going to lay it all out in the garage and take a nice photo with it like I'm a cartel member posing with everything they just lifted from the local police station. Huh. Maybe that's why Large knows where the police stations are. Could it be that he was a member of the infamous Oregon cartel known as the Dysentery Devils? Well, we'll never know. What we do know is that we're going to sort through all of this stuff and put together a nicely kitted out rifle. We're going with this Bushmaster XM15, fitted with a laser sight, angled foregrip, EOTech 553 and a compensator. But don't be fooled, the recoil isn't the only thing we're compensating for with this. Anyway, we'll be carrying the standard NATO loadout of 6 spare 30-round Stanags and a few hundred rounds in boxes, just sitting around in our pockets, I guess. I don't actually know how many spare mags is standard in the forces, but 6 feels about right. It's also just how many we have, so maybe that's why we're carrying 6. I just drove the Pazuzu, beat up as it is, to somewhere vaguely populous looking and started making noise, shooting anything that shambled forth. This gun isn't actually great for this, but I got it all set up and we brought it out here, so we're going to make the best of it. With a montage. But only a quick one, because I can't just make Project Zomboid shooting montages like it's 2013 and I'm a COD prodigy. The kill count is up to 1054 now. I probably should have checked it before I set off, but you know, I forgot. So, that was okay, but I think we can do better. We're heading out at dawn the next day with a striker, 434 shells and a cabbage. Driving towards that massive mall on the other side of town. I got out to test it in front of this hotel on the way and oh yeah, it works. Sorry Mr. Remington, but you've definitely just been replaced. Onwards to the mall. That's always good fun. After the dust has settled, Large sits at 1,620 something zombies killed. Not too bad. I think Large is going to settle down here for a while. The fields are flourishing and there's plenty of fish and birds to catch. The local population is relatively easy to keep in check. So let's leave him to live out his years on this dead world in peace, shall we? Now, our world isn't dead, but it's not exactly looking great either, so best just stay indoors for now, yeah? It's for your own safety. Thanks as ever for all the support. Those of you on Patreon and the channel members are very much appreciated, as are the rest of you, of course. I hope you've enjoyed following Large on his journey, but I also hope you understand that all stories must come to an end. Take solace in the fact that this ending was a happy one. Well, it didn't end with the protagonist's death, which is happy by my Zomboid standards. Anyway, until next time, thanks for watching. Goodbye.